Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 188. Shizun, I really love you. Chu Wanning's chest suddenly tightened. The rain was too heavy, the weather was too cold and he felt too hot. They could go back to Shisheng Peak but he used such lame excuses to take him to an inn. No matter how stupid Chu Wanning was, he would understand what he meant. Mo Ran was checking his pulse, trying to read his thoughts. If he shook his head, Mo Ran would not force him. But if he agreed, it meant that he was willing to do it with him. Do what with him? Chu Wanning did not know. Even if he knew, he was not willing to think about it. He only felt that his face was burning hot, a heat that even the heavy rain could not extinguish. He was so nervous that he did not know what to say, so he held the wine jar by its narrow neck and tried to take another sip. But the jug was almost empty. When the last trace of the slightly cold and thick pear blossom white wine entered his throat, he lowered his head. The bright red tassels made his fingers look even more slender and fair. He did not say anything. The atmosphere turned a little awkward. Mo Ran was not a person who liked to drink alcohol. At this time, seeing him raise his head to drink, he suddenly asked, "Anything left?" "No, there's nothing left." "You are so impatient. You drink so fast." Mo Ran said, lowering his head and gently kissing him on the lips, "Then I can only have a taste." The taste of pear blossom white wine was mellow and sweet, with a faint fragrance of osmanthus flower. When he was 30 years old, Chu Wanning passed away. That time Mo Ran spent the whole night drinking pear blossom white wine all alone on the roof, but he could not taste anything. If there was a taste that he could recall at time, then it was bitterness. Later and after his rebirth, Mo Ran was not willing to touch wine anymore. He found it too bitter. He kissed Chu Wanning's slightly cold lips. At first, it was just a light peck, then a careful touch. Then he moved and carefully kissed his lips again. The sound of the rain rumbled, but the rest of the world felt so distant. There was no one around and the pouring rain became a natural curtain that surrounded them. They didn't know when it started, but they found themselves embracing each other, kissing and entangling together. Their lips and tongues were wet as they rubbed against each other. The sound of their fierce kisses and the wild beating of their hearts were drowned out by the sound of the downpour, which were as loud as the roar of drums. Unlike the cold raindrops, Mo Ran's breath was hot. His kisses moved from his lips to the bridge of his nose, to his eyes, between his eyebrows and then to his temples. The rough and moist tongue reached out to lick his ear. Chu Wanning couldn't stand this kind of stimulation. His body tensed up and his fingers clenched into fists, but he didn't want to make a sound. Mo Ran rubbed the back of his neck as he nibbled on his earlobe and caressed the tiny mole behind his ear. Chu Wanning trembled in his arms. Mo Ran hugged him even tighter. He wanted to crush his entire body, meld him into his own and knead him into his flesh and blood. His voice was low and hoarse. He whispered in Chu Wanning's ear, "Shizun." He called respectfully, but his hands were sensually caressing the person in his arms. This young man had been in the pot for a long time and the suppressed eagerness finally overflowed. The boiling water was bubbling, and the water was about to burn out. It was about to be boiled dry, but the firewood was only getting stronger and stronger, tormenting him. Tormenting them. "Please come with me." Perhaps he was possessed, but he actually let Mo Ran hold his hand tightly as they ran in the rain. It was so absurd. The rain was extremely cold, but when it fell on their bodies, it felt like it was burning hot. Neither of them opened a barrier nor did they buy an umbrella. It was as if they had lost their spiritual core and they were nothing more than the most ordinary of mortal. They allowed the wind to blow at them and the rain to get them wet. They hurriedly followed the swaying red lanterns in the heavy rain and ran into an inn. The inn's attendant was yawning. He probably thought that with such a heavy rain and the lateness of the hour, no traveler would come to stay. Thus, he was shocked when he saw the two of them barging in wet and actually jumped in fright. Mo Ran held Chu Wanning's wrist tightly. His palm was so hot that it seemed like it was going to evaporate the water. He wiped away the water droplets that were dripping down his handsome face. He said somewhat anxiously, "We want to stay." "Ah, right, right. Here's the keys to 2 rooms. That's a total of..." "What?" Hearing that they were being given 2 rooms, Moran became even more anxious. His throat moved, and his slender fingers curled up and knocked on the counter. "No, we only want 1 room." The inn attendant stared blankly for a moment. He looked at Moran and then looked at Chu Wanning. Chu Wanning suddenly turned his face away. His face was burning fiercely. He calmly broke free from Moran's grasp and then said, "We want 2 rooms." The inn attendant was slightly hesitant and then said considerately, "If you don't have enough money, 1 room is also fine." "We want 2 rooms." Chu Wanning was resolute and decisive. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, causing the inn attendant to take a step back. He didn't know what he did to provoke this white-clothed cultivator, but he quickly handed over 2 keys in fear and trepidation and received the money accordingly. Chu Wanning slowed his breathing, doing his best to make himself look as calm as usual. Unfortunately, his body was dripping wet and there were even raindrops that seeped down his pitch-black eyebrows and into his eyes. He blinked, and his eyelashes became wet. "I'm going up first. You go buy some ginger tea and dry towels and then come up later," Chu Wanning said in a serious and dignified manner. He even deliberately took a brass key from Moran in front of the waiter and then went upstairs alone. He looked very innocent. Moran didn't say anything behind him, but he secretly felt that it was funny. He knew that Chu Wanning's face was thin. No matter what, he still had to put on an act in front of others. Chu Wanning came to the room. It was a single room and the bed was also narrow. He glanced at the bed and only felt that his throat was very dry. His face was burning fiercely. He didn't dare to take a second look and only stood in the middle of the room. He didn't even light a candle and didn't know what he should do. His head was still dizzy and he felt that all of this was so absurd, so sudden, and so unexpected. How could it be like this? How could he be standing here? How could he ran through the rain to mess around? How could he? Before he finished his rambling thought, the door behind him opened and Moran walked in. Chu Wanning's body suddenly tensed up and his 10 fingers clenched into fists under his wide sleeves. He tried his best to stop the slight tremors in his bones, but he couldn't do it. This was the first time in his life that he was so confused and helpless as to place the string of the kite to someone else's hands. His palms were very wet and he didn't know if it was from the rain or sweat. With a click, the door bolt was dropped. It was so audible that it made people's hair stand on end, as if an executioner's knife was placed on the neck, releasing the smell of iron in the air. It was like the sharp teeth of a beast biting its prey. The smell of blood. Chu Wanning suddenly, felt a kind of fear that made him want to escape. Fortunately, his face did not show it. Moran opened his mouth to speak and his voice was still gentle, not too aggressive but somewhat hoarse. "Why didn't you light a candle?" "I forgot." Moran put the wooden tray on the table, and handed a small bowl with a hot bamboo hat to Chu Wanning. "Ginger tea. You asked for it, right? Drink it while it's hot." As he spoke, he walked to the window to lit the candlestick by the west window. The wind was blowing and the rain was slanting outside. The room was very dark but the grapevine-patterned window was open and outside, the lights of other houses were dimly lit, casting a faint glow. Moran stood in front of the open window, by the beautiful and slender bronze candlestick with cranes and birds. The white curtain of rain set off his tall figure. That silhouette was tall and pleasant, handsome, and well-defined. When he fiddled with the flint, his thin and curly eyelashes were particularly clear, like 2 black butterflies. He was a cultivator and it shouldn't be that troublesome to light a fire, but he was willing to act like the most ordinary person, and use the most ordinary method to quietly and steadily light that ray of light, so that the heart stamen would light up and the candle light would soften into red tears. The flint was polished, and just as he was about to touch the wick of the lamp, Chu Wanning suddenly said, "Don't light the lamp." Mo Ran's hand was suspended in midair as he turned to look at him. "What?" Chu Wanning didn't know what to say and could only stiffly repeat, "Don't light the lamp." Mo Ran was a bit dazed for a moment. Then he looked at the person standing stiffly in the darkness and slowly understood. Even if it was Yuhang of the night sky, there would be times when he was afraid, there would be things that he feared, and there would be things he wouldn't know much about. Those people who had slept with him in his previous life, whether it was a man or a woman, all wished that Taxi and June could see their faces more. No one had ever asked for the lights to be extinguished, and they would rather have the red candles burning high in the night. They used all kinds of tricks, all kinds of flattery and all kinds of charm to win half an inch of Taxi and Jun's affection. Mo Ran didn't feel sentimental. Whether it was Rongju at the beginning or Song Kaiyutong later on. It was strange to say that he doted on them back then, because he stubbornly felt that they were like Shimei, so he kept them by his side. It was almost like an act of infatuation. But in bed, he never liked to look at their faces. He always just let them turn their backs to him. He didn't kiss them and he didn't like to touch them. Even in the midst of usual and repetitive actions, his mind was clear. He even suddenly felt that it was very boring. It was really boring. He couldn't remember those smiling, flattering, orgasmic and blushing faces under the candlelight. Now that he thought about it, those feelings had nothing to do with pleasure and also had nothing to do with love. Instead, it was more like he was sinking into a quagmire of chaos, falling into it, making himself seem dirtier, seedier. They were acts of desperation. He hated that he couldn't dye his bones black. As once he reached the darkest point, then he would no longer crave for light nor extravagantly hope for redemption. He would no longer dare to embrace the last ball of fire in the world. Great. But why didn't he give up yet? No matter how much he told himself that life was hopeless, and that the world was dark, he would still reach out his trembling claws and abruptly strangle Chu Wanning's neck in the midst of the turmoil and torment in the unstable Wushan palace, pressing him against the cold golden stone bricks, pressing him against the blue stone platform in the bleak courtyard, between the messy bedding on the pillows, in the snow, in the hot springs, even in the high seats of the imperial court, in the ancestral hall, in the most solemn and respectable places. Tarnishing him. Looking at his face, kissing his neck, cheeks, and lips, calling out his name. Tearing him apart. Actually, at that time Chu Wanning also wanted the darkness, wanted the candles to not to be lit. He didn't want any light at all. However, Chu Wanning didn't say anything, didn't want to say anything, and didn't want to make any requests. Thinking about it, for the 8 years Chu Wanning was under confinement in Shisheng Peak, he had only asked 2 things, one at the beginning and one at the end. The first was when he voluntarily stepped into the Wushan palace, he asked him to let Xuemeng go. The last was when he asked him to forgive himself before he died. If not for his coldness and disappointments, how could he have ended like this? Mo Ran put down the fire knife and flint, and didn't say anything for a long time. It was so long that Chu Wanning slightly relaxed his tense body. It was so long that Chu Wanning asked him softly, "What's wrong?" Mo Ran said, "Nothing." His voice was gentle, moist, and seemed to be on the verge of tears. He walked over and hugged the person who was still standing in the darkness. Both of them were still wet from the rain. Mo Ran hugged him and said, "Wanning." For a moment, he was tempted to tell him about his past life, but his throat was choked as if a fishbone has clogged it and he couldn't say a word. He really couldn't say it. It was not easy to get this kind of warmth. Whether it was for him or for Chu Wanning, it was too hard to come by. Even if he was extremely guilty of 1,000 things, he couldn't say it. He didn't want to say it. He didn't want to wake up. "I just want to have a good dream. Until dawn." There was no light, no fire. In the darkness, Mo-Ran embraced him and kissed him. The kiss was very focused and gradually became lingering. It was very quiet in the room. Even the sound of the rain couldn't disturb the silence. They could hear each other's breathing, their heartbeat, the touch of their lips, and the slight moist sound when they changed their angles. Chu Wanning tried his best to make his breathing normal, but it was useless. Under Mo-Ran's kisses and caresses, the rise and fall of his chest gradually became more rapid. He was a tall and well-proportioned man, but Mo-Ran could easily hold him, cover him as he was as tall as a mountain. This man held him in his hot embrace. At first, he pecked and kissed him lightly, but then he went deeper. He pried open Chu Wanning's lips and teeth. His warm and coarse tongue probed in, rubbing and entangling with his. He was like a person who was extremely thirsty and finally having a drink of sweet dew, but also like a person who was burning with fire and wanted to use water to extinguish the fire. However, Chu Wanning's breath was not cool water to him, but pine oil. When poured into a fire, it burned endlessly, like a beacon. It was unknown who took off whose clothes first. In the dark night, their breaths mingled as their throat moved, resulting into low swallowing sound. Perhaps it was because of the hasty removal of clothing or an intense action resulting in pain, or perhaps because of the throbbing of a long drought. There were occasional uncontrollable soft moans in the room. But more often than not, it was the excited panting of a male's desire. Chu Wanning's clothes were pulled open, and before he could get used to the slight coolness, he felt Mo-Ran moving down, kissing his neck, then his collarbone, and then his lips sucked on his chest, moist and hot. Chu Wanning gasped softly, his neck tilted back, embarrassed and excited. His face was red, but fortunately, it was dark. He thought that Mo-Ran couldn't see the heat on his face, when he said softly, "Window." "What?" Mo-Ran looked up vaguely and met Chu Wanning's drooping, moist eyes. He originally wanted to hear what Chu Wanning was saying, but with just one glance, his scalp went numb and the blood in his brain surged. He couldn't control the fierce desire that suffused him. He kissed him, caressed him, and kissed him extensively again. Then he slightly let go of Chu Wanning's lips with such great reluctance that he had to kiss him again before he asked in a low voice, "What is it?" "Window." Chu Wanning's heart was beating very fast. He didn't know how to breathe evenly during the long kiss, so his head was dizzy. "You haven't closed the window." Mo-Ran went to close the window. The last bit of light from the outside was also blocked, plunging the room in total darkness where the fire of desire burned unrestrained. Mo-Ran felt that the blood in his body was boiling hot. They stumbled and bumped into each other. They then rolled onto the bed. The bed had been in disrepair for a long time and it made a heavy creaking sound. Mo-Ran didn't give Chu Wanning a chance to react, and was already on top of Chu Wanning's body. His hands made quick work of removing the rest of his white robes. He felt Chu Wanning tremble slightly under his body, just like when they made love for the first time in their previous life. Even if he wasn't restrained like back then, Chu Wanning was still trembling, shuddering slightly, and he couldn't help it. Mo-Ran felt tenderness and pity. He cupped Chu Wanning's face, kissing his eyelids, his lips, and his chin. He whispered hoarsely in his ear, "Don't be afraid." "I'm not afraid." Mo-Ran held Chu Wanning's trembling hand, intertwining their fingers. His hot and vigorous breath brushed past Chu Wanning's earlobes. He comforted him, "Leave everything to me, it'd be good, it's all right." Chu Wanning wanted to say something. He wanted to fiercely say a few words, anything at all, but he couldn't say anything. His mind was almost numb. He could only feel Mo-Ran's tall and robust body pressing on top of him, his calloused hands rubbing his waist and back. He couldn't bear the stimulation. He slightly arched his body, but unintentionally pressed close to Mo-Ran's chest. Mo-Ran's robes had long been removed, revealing his strong and muscular upper body. The astonishing heat and strength of him caused his whole body to melt and soften. The slight wet and sweaty bodies entangled together, every inch of skin rubbing against each other, bringing out fire and sticky water. The loud gasps in the room became more and more heavy with desire and thirst. No matter how much they kissed, no matter how fiercely they kissed, the thirst remained unsatisfied, unquenchable. Not knowing why, in Chu Wanning's dazed mind, some fragmented and blurry visions flashed through. It was of moving bodies, weak legs, bright red curtains and crimson mattress. It was that ambiguous dream that he kept having that suddenly became clear in his mind. In the dream, Moran was fiercely thrusting into him, holding his waist, his crotch fiercely hitting, penetrating deeply and fiercely. He didn't know if it was because of pleasure or some other reason, but in the dream, although Moran's facial features were handsome, it seemed somewhat sinister, with a pair of beast-like eyes. Chu Wanning didn't have any doubts, he didn't know about this, but he thought that it was human nature to dream of such a realistic scene when desire overcomes them. However, Moran didn't know about this. To his knowledge, Chu Wanning had no idea about sex and definitely didn't know how making love was between two men. He was afraid of scaring Chu Wanning. He didn't want his first time to hurt, and so he extensively caressed Chu Wanning, ensuring that the foreplay was sufficient. In this life, he didn't want to make Chu Wanning uncomfortable or experience any pain. Fierce kissing, caressing, rubbing together, the desire grew stronger and stronger. Chu Wanning had never experienced this kind of stimulation before, and gradually he couldn't take it anymore. One of his hands was tightly clasping Moran's hand, while the other hand was silently gripping the beddings. He wanted to put his hands down and rub himself, but his face was flushed red. He was reluctant to do such an embarrassing thing in front of the person he loves. But his cock has swelled so fiercely, it was burning hot with how his underpants were supporting such considerable hard object. Chu Wanning felt that he had lost all his face and that he was in great pain. He wanted to comfort himself, wanted to relieve himself, but his was stubborn and resolute. Gradually, his narrowed eyes became misty and he was at a loss, he didn't know what to do, how to do. But deep in his bones, he seemed to know what to do, how to make a man feel good. There was desire and love in his chest. He loved the man on top of him, and he wanted to dive into the sea of desire with him, and he wanted to sink into the abyss with him. Another vision flashed in front of his eyes, shaky and strange. So strange, how could it be at Shi Sheng Peak? In Loyalty Hall. There was a flash of insight in his mind, but it was drowned in an instant. He saw that Moran was sitting on a magnificent seat at Loyalty Hall, which was supposed to be a solemn place to welcome distinguished guests. Moran was sitting there, and he, himself, was on top of Moran, being embraced by him face to face. He was naked and ashamed, but Moran was fully clothed save for his cock, which was being covered by his dangling legs. Moran was kissing him, pushing up and teasing him. His eyes were fixed on his face without blinking. He asked, "Do you feel good?" He seemed to see himself shaking his head in pain. Moran's finger reached into his mouth and pried it open, as if he was forcing a moan from him. "Moan properly. Moan out." He refused, with only small whimper coming out from his throat. Moran no longer pushed, but instead buried himself deep into his body. He held his waist and guided his body to slowly slide down onto his cock. He then held his ass cheeks, crushing his hair out of the way as he hoarsely and fiercely said, "Moan, ah. No." He grabbed his waist and his ass again and let him fall slowly and deeply onto his cock. He watched Chu Wanning with wet eyes, seeing him endure, trembling but still not making a sound. Moran then grasped his waist and started to fuck into him, but due to the narrow distance, his thrusts were fast and compact. Chu Wanning felt that he was going to be driven mad by the terrible friction. His whole person seemed to be penetrated again and again. "No. Don't. It's not up to you to decide." The person on the seat sneered. Moran didn't move anymore, but his hot and hard cock was ready to burst out, throbbing inside his body in time with the beating of his heart. "What's more, aren't you feeling good, too? Look, how hard you are." These words and influences were blurry, fragmented and muddy. It was like he was hallucinating because of the strong stimulation. Chu Wanning laid blankly on the bed of the inn. He was confused and trembling. His cock was so painfully hard. What's wrong? What should I do? The vision in his mind became more and more blurry, but he could vaguely make out that Mo Ran on the seat was suddenly thrusting fiercely into him. He would pull out until only the head of his cock was inside his opening, only to strongly thrust in again in one strong motion. It was too much. Finally, the him in the vision couldn't take it anymore. He collapsed on the man's body and gasped for breath. Ah, ah. The man was also panting for breath, fiercely penetrating him as he moved his body to meet each thrust of his hips. You're moaning so wantonly. Aren't you afraid of being heard by others? Damn it, do you want me to fuck you to death? The vision became more and more blurry, until it couldn't be seen anymore. It was an illusion, an illusion. If it was fake, then it was fake. It was an overlapping dream, a nightmare that wouldn't go away. But the feeling of being penetrated, of being forcefully taken was so clear. Was this the right thing to do? Chu Wanning half closed his eyes in a daze and said in a low voice, "Put it in." Mo Ran was shocked. Chu Wanning knew what to do. How did he know? This was a person who had never even seen an erotic picture, a clean piece of white paper. How did he know? Isn't that how it should be done? His face was so red that it looked like blood was going to drip out from it. He muttered and asked the man on top of him. How did you know? Of course, Chu Wanning was too embarrassed to say that he dreamt of it. That would make him seem perverted and shameless. He said vaguely, I accidentally flipped through the library and saw it. Then he hurriedly added, someone put the wrong book. Mo Ran naturally didn't doubt him. His heart was slightly relieved and was also slightly moved. He kissed Chu Wanning's lips and the tip of his nose, then said, You're not ready. Not ready. Who was not ready? Immediately, his blood and chi surged. He was furious and humiliated, but Mo Ran leaned over and hugged him, his chest touching his. He stroked Chu Wanning's hair and said gently, It'll hurt. Then don't. In order to save face, Chu Wanning said resolutely and decisively. Mo Ran laughed softly. His low and slightly hoarse voice was mellow and pleasant to listen to. He said, Don't worry about me, tonight. His voice gradually became softer. Chu Wanning blinked. What did he mean? He saw Mo Ran's strong and muscular arms propping himself up and staring at him from above. Then he slowly sat up and moved down. This was something that had never happened in his dreams. What was he doing? Tonight is all about you. I just want to make you feel good. As he spoke, he leaned over and untied his underpants before Chu Wanning could react. He looked at Chu Wanning's hot and throbbing member with heated and passionate gaze, then he took it into his mouth. Ah! Chu Wanning felt a tremor deep into his spine as he gasped heavily. What was this feeling? How could it be like this? How dirty! But it felt so good to be enveloped by his lover's warm mouth, sucking on it. Mo Ran made sure that his teeth did not accidentally nip his erect shaft as he sucked on it. Hearing Chu Wanning's rapid breathing and low panting, he raised his eyes and gazed at him tenderly, even indulgently. Taxian Jun. He had never done such a thing before. In the past, he had never even thought that he would do such a thing. But now he was more than willing, obsessively and gladly do it. Don't. How could you? Quick, take it out. Chu Wanning's face was extremely red. He bit his lips and shook his head. His phoenix eyes that were usually as sharp as knives were now filled with lust and panic. So cute. Mo Ran hollowed his cheek as he sucked, deep-throating him. Chu Wanning couldn't take it anymore. He leaned on the bed and gasped for breath. His eyes were dilated and gradually lost focus. Mo Ran sucked back and forth a few times before retreating. A trace of lust hung on his lips and his eyes were moist. He asked, "Darling, did it feel good?" Chu Wanning felt as if there were colorful fireworks exploding in his brain. His whole body was frazzled, but he still whimpered Mo Ran's name. He only felt shame and pleasantly buzzed. His bones were sore and soft. How could he? He was his Shizun. He was so many years older than him. He was the Yuhang of the night sky. Ah! A deep and hoarse voice sounded in this quiet and dark bedroom. Mo Ran licked his plump and round cock head. The tip of his tongue was nimble and rough, rubbing against the place where Chu Wanning rarely touched. Chu Wanning was so stimulated that he began to shed tears. Just like in his previous life, he was proud and unwilling, but he couldn't deny Mo Ran. He was still willing to be intimate with Mo Ran. He couldn't resist it. His throat bobbed as hoarse gasps escaped from his lips. He unconsciously closed his hazy eyes. When Mo Ran took him into his mouth again and started move his head in a thrusting motion to further pleasure him, he anxiously reached out his hand. His slender fingers sank into the top of Mo Ran's black hair, unable to push back. Don't do that. It's dirty. Ah! But Mo Ran only raised his moist eyes and looked at him with his dark eyes full of desire. He said, "I love you. I like to treat you like this. I want to make you feel good. How can it be dirty?" He gently kissed the shaft that was so swollen that the veins were protruding visibly. He said gently, "I like every part of you." After he finished speaking, he lowered his head and continued to lick and suck. Chu Wanning was a virgin and was extremely inexperienced. How could he withstand such an attack? This was the first time something like this was being done to him, so it didn't take long for him to release. When he was on the verge of orgasm, he couldn't control himself anymore. He thrusted deep into Mo Ran's throat and come. Mo Ran should be very uncomfortable, right? Heaven and earth were vast and boundless, and he felt as if he was floating between it. He had never thought that coming would be this intensely pleasurable. Even with his mind clouded by such extreme pleasure, he was still vaguely aware of what he had done in the end. He wanted to get up and wipe Mo Ran's lips. He wanted to caress him, kiss him, and thank him. But his waist has gone soft, his legs and feet were limp and numb. He couldn't get up. And when he looked over with trembling eyelashes, Mo Ran had already swallowed the turbid liquid he had spurted out. This knowledge made Chu Wanning's mind got even more blank. The back of his neck was faintly numb and twitching. In the end, Mo Ran turned over. His burning hot body covered Chu Wanning's panting body. Mo Ran stroked his face. His own cock was still hard and stiff, pressing against Chu Wanning's lower abdomen. Perhaps it was because of this that his eyes were a little red with an aura of a wild beast in them. However, the burning gaze he directed towards Chu Wanning was infinitely gentle. "I love you. I really, really, really love you." It was the ambition of a wolf, but it was also the return of a prodigal son who had turned around bearing the guilt and sin but still unwilling to give up this selfish, desperate, and passionate longing. "I love you." End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 189. Shizun, you're so good. The room was very quiet. So quiet that the sound of their heartbeat and breathing were audible. The air was filled with the scent of spent passion, which was sweet. Lying on the bed, Mo Ran changed his position and hugged Chu Wanning from behind. He gently kissed his eyelids and his neck. Their bodies were drenched in sweat and the temperature of their bodies was shockingly high. They stuck together, rubbing against each other, entangling with each other. Chu Wanning's head was still dizzy and he didn't even dare to think about what they had just done. Everything was so absurd. But his heart was very warm and blazingly hot. Warm water surged under his chest, wanting to break through the ground. Suddenly, Mo Ran heard the person in his arms whisper, "Then what about you?" Mo Ran froze for a moment. "What? Chu Wanning coughed lightly, you. He didn't say anything else and turned over in the dark. A pair of bright eyes slowly looked into Mo Ran's eyes. Even though the surroundings were dark, Mo Ran felt like he saw Chu Wanning's face turn red. You still? Chu Wanning hesitated for a long time, but he still couldn't say it. In the end, he only lowered his eyelashes and said, I'll help you. Mo Ran suddenly understood and felt tenderness in his heart. He hugged him and said, don't be silly. It's all right, we'll talk about it later. I'm not silly. Chu Wanning stiffly said. He didn't want to say that he was stupid. Aren't you the silly one? You're like this. Don't you feel uncomfortable? Cough, I'll wait for you to fall asleep and then I'll take a bath. Chu Wanning insisted, I'll help you. No need. Mo Ran hurriedly stopped him. Chu Wanning didn't say anything else. He seemed to feel that his clumsy performance in bed was inferior and embarrassing. He probably wouldn't really make Mo Ran feel good. Saying that he would take a shower afterwards was just to leave himself some face. The meaning was probably that he was better at using his hands than he was. He pondered like this and his face slowly cooled. Finally, he said, if you don't want it, then forget it. Mo Ran was slightly startled. Because of the lingering feelings of love, Chu Wanning's voice wasn't as impeccable as usual. It wasn't as indiscernible as before. The feeling of indignation in his voice was too heavy, heavy to the point that it was crystal clear. Why was this person so silly? How could he not want it? He wished that the night would never end and the storm would never stop. He wished that he could spend the rest of his life with Chu Wanning in this inn. He wished that he could eat the person in his arms inside and out, fuse with his body and intertwine with his soul. He wanted to see Chu Wanning choking with sobs because of his bullying. He wanted to see his own aura and his mark in Chu Wanning's body, but Chu Wanning would probably find it uncomfortable. He had done it with Chu Wanning in his previous life. He knew that after that time, Chu Wanning had a high fever for a long time. He would never forget that pale face with chapped lips. This time, he wanted to take things slowly, step by step. It didn't matter if he had to endure hardship. He wanted Chu Wanning's first time to be enjoyable so that their next times would only be filled with excitement and pleasure, so that he won't be afraid to further explore and indulge. But Chu Wanning clearly misunderstood something. Mo Ran kissed his forehead and said in a low voice, how could I not want it? What are you thinking about? Don't you see the state I'm in right now? The man's hot breath was right next to his ear. His voice was moist. Look what you have done to me. How can you still think that I don't want you? Idiot. Chu Wanning was furious. If you call me an idiot again, I will cut off your head. You. But his hand was caught by Mo Ran and brought to a certain place. Chu Wanning was shocked and couldn't say any more words. He only felt that the top of his head was steaming. It's already like this all because of you. In the dark night, he kissed his eyelids again. Then, he went down and kissed his lips. He sucked, licked, and rubbed his lips with infatuation. After kissing for a while, both of them couldn't control themselves. The love in the room became more and more intense. Their lips and tongues were sucking each other and their legs and feet were entwined together. They rubbed against each other tightly. The fire of desire was almost visible to the naked eye. In the midst of their passion, Mo Ran heard Chu Wanning mumbling something in a low voice. He was a little unwilling and a little embarrassed, but his voice was still stubborn. I also want to make you feel good. His voice was trembling at the end. Shame seemed to be drowning him. Mo Ran's heart was about to melt. His desire got even more swollen to the point that it was almost ferocious. Chu Wanning's hand was still holding his cock so that the fierce sword stretches all the way from the palm to the back. Chu Wanning could clearly feel the vigorous and hot state of the fierce blade that was described in the size ranking of the young heroes of the cultivation world. It was so thick, so hard, and scalding hot. It was pressed against his body through his underpants. It was so strong. He felt that there was no way he could hold it in his mouth. Making love with this man would probably take his life. Chu Wanning finally understood. When Mo Ran said that it would hurt, he wasn't worrying for no reason. How could it hurt? It was obvious that he would be torn and cut open, his body would be split apart. But then he recalled how well Mo Ran had treated him. Chu Wanning didn't know where he got his courage from. Or maybe it was because he was originally a ruthless person who was unwilling to bow down even before he tried. Mo Ran panicked. It was not easy to maintain his rationality now. If Chu Wanning really wanted to take him in, he was afraid that all the remaining warmth in his heart would be burned to ashes by the fire of his desire. A man who was completely controlled by lust was a fierce beast. He had no reason, no sense. He only wanted extreme pleasure and to possess madly. He was well acquainted with that man. He pressed down on Chu Wanning and said hoarsely, "Don't be like this, Wanning. You. It's fine. I'll just follow from what you did." "You can't." Mo Ran's voice was like boiling water. His throat moved and he said bitterly, "I won't be able to hold back." Chu Wanning didn't understand. He was startled as he asked, "What do you mean?" Mo Ran cursed inwardly. He couldn't take it anymore. Chu Wanning's breath, voice, and body were slowly making him lose the shackles he had put on himself. It was burning his self-restraint to ashes. He gasped for a while and suddenly got up. He flipped Chu Wanning around and pressed him onto the bed. Before Chu Wanning could react, he felt himself being held down in an irrevocable fierce way. Mo Ran's hot and vigorous body wrapped around him from behind. Almost at this moment, he felt that shockingly large shaft through Mo Ran's thin underpants as it fiercely pressed on his ass. Caught off guard, Chu Wanning cried out in a low voice. That voice was lustful and soft. It was something he didn't expect. Chu Wanning's face instantly turned red. His fingers tightly gripped the mattress as he bit on his lips tightly. He didn't want to gasp or cry out. "Can't hold back." He vaguely understood Mo Ran's words just now. Then he heard Mo Ran behind him while rubbing against him through his underpants. He said in a hoarse voice, "I can't help wanting to get in, wanting to do you. Why don't you understand?" His hot breath blew on the back of his ear. The man's strong and muscular arm supported himself on the mattress with one hand and held his waist tightly with the other. His lower body kept rubbing against his and his throat let out heavy and hurried gasps. After moving against him like this for a while, Mo Ran suddenly patted his ass and said in a low voice, "Close your legs." In a daze, Chu Wanning did as he was told. But he didn't feel any movement. Just as he was about to turn around, an extremely hot and hard, thick and big weapon suddenly squeezed between his ass cheeks. He couldn't help but gasp for breath. His eyes were unfocused and his scalp was numb. Mo Ran took off his underpants. No longer covered by cloth, his huge cock was dark and full of blood. The round cock had secreted a sparkling and translucent liquid as it penetrated the space between his ass cheeks until his whole cock was wrapped by Chu Wanning's warm and tender inner thighs. He let out a sigh of pleasure and held Chu Wanning's waist as he thrust it in and out. Ah! Chu Wanning didn't expect that it could be done like this. That thick huge cock rubbed against his sensitive skin, leaking bodily fluids. It was so hard and blazingly hot that he trembled with every thrust. His waist felt weak, his spine felt numb and his vision was blurred with unshed tears. He couldn't think, couldn't feel anything except the intense stimulation of being rubbed against by the man he loved. He silently gasped for breath. His cheeks were slightly tilted to the side and pressed against the pillow. His hair was scattered. Mo Ran's cock rubbed against his opening several times. If he pressed inside it, he would invade his Shizun and irrevocably possess the man underneath him. Chu Wanning was incited by the fear and excitement of the thought that Mo Ran could penetrate inside his body at any time, of being completely possessed by him until he vented all his desires inside of him. The man's crotch hit his ass fiercely and passionately, crazily and hungrily. The noise of slapping skin to skin sounded in the room. He could feel Moran's pubic hair rubbing against the skin of his ass and legs as his movements became more and more frantic. Shizun, clamp a little tighter. Ah! The man's request was low and full of lust, causing him to unconsciously follow his instructions. Yes. Just like that. A little tighter. Fuck. His desire raised to new height and his mind became hazy. Lust and his bestial nature gradually swallowed him as he continued to thrust frantically. Moran's neck was slightly raised and he swallowed. His Adam's apple moved seductively. Shizun. Darling. It's so hot inside you. Ah. N. The inside was roughly between his thighs, but it sounded so erotic. Those low and deep murmurs, filthy and rough words, didn't feel dirty. Chu Wanning felt that he was probably going crazy. Listening to his panting, he felt his heart grow hotter and hotter, more and more uncontrollable. He asked softly, "Does it feel good?" "So good." Moran slightly opened his eyes. They were moist, bright, and unfocused. He leaned over and covered him with his broad shoulders. He held him in his arms and pressed him on the bed. His upper body was tightly pressed together, entangling with each other while his lower body was fiercely moving up and down into him, making the skin in between them more and more wet as his body felt hotter and hotter. With one hand, he held Chu Wanning's chin and kissed him passionately. Their mouths and tongues battled each other, sticky and moist. His cock stirred between his legs, thrusting in and between his crotch. The bedpost was shaking as his cock tried its best to go deeper. His toes were pressed against the mattress and they had turned pale from the force. Under such manipulation, Chu Wanning even had the illusion that his body was being penetrated inside. He raised his head and kissed Moran fiercely. Under the cover of the dark night, he became shameless. The love he felt made him move by instinct alone and present an erotic and irrationally seductive posture. Probably because the kiss was so intense, his heart was beating so fast that he couldn't breathe. Chu Wanning vaguely saw another blurry vision. He didn't know where it was, but it was also on a bed. That bed was wide and covered with a bright red mattress. Legs and feet were intertwined, panting and hot sweat, all signifying intense lust. It was in the same position. He was being penetrated from behind while a hand was holding his face as he was being kissed. However, his body was already stretched opened. A swollen and pierced cock was moving in and out of his opening. He didn't know how long it had been in there. It seemed some sort of lubricant has been used so it didn't hurt that much. Instead it felt hot and very wet. A point inside his body was being stimulated as it was being poked vigorously. Ah, ah. He heard someone screaming, panting, and moaning with a soft, muddled voice. Moran kept on fucking into him, endlessly. His movements became more and more brutal. His own cock was so hard that he wanted to die. His body was being violently invaded. He didn't know why, but it felt so good and addicting. It was as if he had been trained. Whenever Moran thrusted inside him, even when his legs felt weak, he would vaguely and instinctively thrust back, wanting to take him in deeper. It was unbearable. It was as if there was something insatiable inside of him that could only be satisfied by Moran's cock. It was as if the strongest aphrodisiac in the world was destroying the most resolute person. He was falling, pandering and moaning in pleasure. Who was it? What a strange vision, what a strange dream, illusion, reality, what exactly was it? Chu Wanning, I'm fucking you. Does it feel good? Look at how good you are feeling. Relax, you're sucking me so hard. I'll come inside you, I'll shoot it all in you, ah. It was a mess. He couldn't hear clearly, but it seemed to be like that. What was going on? It sounded like Moran's voice but at the same time didn't. Moran had never used such a distorted voice to speak, never. Couldn't hear clearly. It should be fake. It's a mess. A confusing mess. Behind him, Moran was getting more and more rough and wild. His toes were on the mattress, and the pillow on the bed had been completely shifted. The man panted and shook, fiercely and passionately thrusting for a long time. In the end, he hugged him tightly. They were like mating beasts. The top craved intense kisses, and the bottom craved wet and hurried sex. Wanning. Shizun. He was panting in a low and hoarse voice, calling out, going crazy with love. Darling. Moran held Chu Wanning's waist tightly, pinching and rubbing. His plump ass moved fiercely, and his Adam's apple bobbed. He had reached his breaking point. His gaze was almost fierce. After the craziest thrusts, which almost broke Chu Wanning, he pulled the man in his arms, kissing and nibbling on his earlobes and neck. Moran's rapidly rising and falling chest pressed against Chu Wanning's wet and warm back. He was on the verge of losing his mind. His other hand was holding that thick and ferocious cock. He could not bear the stimulation and groaned, pressing it against Chu Wanning whole. After seeing how fierce and wild this thing was, Chu Wanning was really panicking. His spine was numb. He struggled, "Didn't you say you wouldn't come in? You wait a minute." Moran panted and kissed his neck. He swallowed his saliva, and then leaned over to kiss Chu Wanning's cheek. "Don't be afraid, I won't go in. But I want to release it here." Moran could barely control himself. His swollen cockhead was pressed against the slightly contracting hole. He cursed inwardly, but didn't say anything. He only violently and hungrily rubbed against Chu Wanning's thighs, accumulating the pleasure to climax. In the end, he took his cock in his hand and rubbed himself, pressing the cockhead tightly against Chu Wanning's hole. Streams of cum spurted out from the asshole, dripping down his inner thighs and flowed down to the beddings. It was extremely messy, smelly, and obscene. Chu Wanning's entire body was trembling, spasming slightly. Moran couldn't help but reach his hand forward, holding Chu Wanning's cock and fondling it passionately. Chu Wanning was almost crushed by shame. His cheeks burned as he said in a low voice, "No, don't touch any more. I already." Moran's eyes were shining, and he murmured infatuatedly, I know you've already come once." Chu Wanning was very humiliated, and the corners of his eyes were moist. He said fiercely, "You, don't say that word." "What word?" "Oh," Moran reacted belatedly, and then laughed deeply, "all right." He kissed him, but the movements of his hands were not polite at all. "But Shizun, I want to see you come again." MMMM. This young man's work was really too good. Chu Wanning was completely helpless. Very soon, he was stimulated to the point that he came for the second time. How could he endure this kind of pressure, this kind of indulgence? Moreover, his head seemed to be in a daze. There were always some vague blurry shadows in front of his eyes and hazy voices in his ears. He felt very sleepy, very tired. "Wanning." He heard Moran call him from behind. It was so gentle, so touching, so affectionate. After the two men satisfied their desires, they calmed their panting breaths. Moran stroked him, kissed him, and gratefully held him in his arms, guarding him like a treasure. Chu Wanning was dizzy, sweat trickling down his back. He leaned his naked back against Moran's warm chest. Finally, he slowly closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next morning, Chu Wanning woke up. The sky shone into the room through a crack in the window. He heard the sound of raindrops hitting the tiles. The rain was still pouring heavily and seemed as if it did not stop at all. He felt a slight headache, and fragments of his visions last night were like fish scales rolling in the water, shining with a mottled and sticky light, floating and sinking. He wanted to recall them, but those scales sank deeper and deeper, and finally completely swallowed by the darkness. Then he remembered what he did with Mo Ran last night. His whole body suddenly froze, and his face quickly burned red. He wanted to get up, but Mo Ran's strong arms were still hugging him from behind. His chest was still pressed against his back, rising and falling evenly. Mo Ran was still not awake. He waited like this for an unknown amount of time. It was hard to tell exactly what hour it was in this dark bedroom, but it should have been very long time. So long that his arms had become a little numb. So long that his rapid heartbeat had gradually slowed down. So long that things stopped being awkward. Chu Wanning finally turned over and looked at Mo Ran's sleeping face. He was very handsome, possessing the most pleasant features in the world. Whether it was his eyebrows, the bridge of his nose or his lips, they were all the best of the best. However, his brows were slightly furrowed at this time, as if a heavy thought that could not be dissolved was plaguing his mind. Chu Wanning gazed at this face again and silently looked at it for a long time. So long that he finally could not help it. Gently, for the first time, he took the initiative to kiss Mo Ran's face. Then he gently moved Mo Ran's arm away and sat on the edge of the bed. He put on his underpants and went to get a clean white inner robe. There were many obvious creases on the robe. Chu Wanning tried to smooth it out, but to no avail. He could only put it on like this, and secretly hoped that the people at Shisheng Peak won't notice anything strange. As he thought of this, he began to put on his clothes. Suddenly he was hugged from behind. Chu Wanning jumped in fright, although the only reaction he showed was that his hands slightly froze. Mo Ran had already woken up at some point. He got up, hugged him, and kissed his earlobe. Shizun. For the first time in his life since he met Chu Wanning, he didn't know what to say and he couldn't look him directly in the yes. Mo Ran also felt a little shy and awkward like a newlywed. After a while, he softly said, "Good morning." "What morning? It's already too late." Chu Wanning did not turn his head and continued to put on his robes. Mo Ran suddenly laughed, with a faint nasal sound. Then he reached out and helped Chu Wanning arrange the pendant around his neck. "This is to ward off the cold. You have to keep it close to your body or else it will not work." Chu Wanning seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and turned to look at him. Last night when they were making love, he felt that there was something tied around Mo Ran's neck, but at that time he was in a daze and couldn't mind to check it out. Now that he looked carefully, it was actually a dragon blood crystal pendant that matched his own. "You?" Chu Wanning was stunned. "When we were at Rufeng sect, didn't you say that this was the last pendant?" "How?" He suddenly shut up. Because he saw Mo Ran looking at him with that smile where his dimples showed, his gaze soft. He suddenly understood Mo Ran's selfishness at that time and suddenly felt a little warm. He turned his face away, sullen but no longer speaking, and only busied himself by tidying his own clothes. "Let's go back early." In the end, he did not dare to look at Mo Ran, only saying, "Someone might notice something if we were any later." Mo Ran obediently said, "We'll do as Shizun said." But after a moment of silence, his desires were still not completely satiated and his blood has yet to cool. He pulled Chu Wanning, who had finished putting on his boots and was about to stand up. He leaned over him and gently kissing him on the lips. "Don't be angry. Once we go back, we'll have to endure it. I just want to keep something to remember by." Mo Ran smiled, the tip of his finger touching Chu Wanning's lips. "Shizun, you're so good." Because of this "you're so good" remark, Chu Wanning was still in a trance when they reached the gates to the mountain. He felt that the one who was good was not himself, but Mo Ran. This young man was handsome, gentle, and a generous lover. Sometimes, it even made Chu Wanning feel that it was very unreal. He felt that this person was too perfect. How could he belong to a dull person like him? He belonged to him who didn't even utter back a decent word of affection. However, when Mo Ran stared at him, his expression spoke of sincere affection, without a trace of falsehood. When Mo Ran kissed him, he could feel his emotions in it as if his breathing was controlled by Chu Wanning, leaving everything in Chu Wanning's hand. Even though his performance last night were clumsy, his words were boring and was even sometimes distracted, Mo Ran did not feel disappointed. When he woke up in the morning, he was still willing to kiss his lips and say, "You're so good." Shizun. He suddenly came back to his senses, and saw that under the red hatang blossom barrier, Mo Ran was smiling and waving at him. "Where are you going?" "Come this way, over there is the Red Lotus Pavilion. Let's go to the Menpo Hall to dine first, then you can go back." In the Menpo Hall, Mo Ran was still sitting in front of him. People are passing by around them and it was very noisy. Unlike before, the two weren't so casual anymore as they lowered their head to eat the food in their bowl. The group of disciples who used to place bet on Chu Wanning could not help but whisper to each other, "Why isn't Elder Yu Hang talking to Shikshan Mo today? Not only is he not talking to him, he doesn't even look at him. It's so strange, Shikshan Mo is also not picking food for Elder Yu Hang either. Isn't he usually quite fawning over him? What's wrong with them, did they quarrel? Would you still sit at the same table after quarreling with your Shizun?" Haha, that's true. Just as they were whispering to each other, they suddenly saw Chu Wanning stand up and pick up his bowl to add some porridge for himself. On his way, his white robe fluttered past them, and the group of busybodies stopped talking and obediently buried their heads in eating steamed buns. After Chu Wanning returned to his seat, they began to murmur among themselves like rats again. "Don't you feel that Elder Yu Hang is a bit strange today?" Someone immediately nodded, "Yes. I can't tell what's strange, it seems like it's his robes." 5 or 6 pairs of eyes secretly looked for a long time, and suddenly a young disciple clicked his tongue and said, "It seems a bit too wrinkled, not as meticulous as usual." When he said this, everyone found that it was indeed the case, but no one's thought veer in that direction. After muttering for a long time, they all concluded amongst themselves that Elder Yu Hang must have gone to the forbidden area in the back of the mountain last night to get rid of some evil spirits and repair the barrier with the ghost realm or something like that. These disciples admired him, looked up to him, and at most found him interesting, but no one would truly treat him as a person of flesh and blood who feel love and desires. So even if Mo Ran and Chu Wanning's actions were not so discreet, even if many clues were easily revealed, they did not pay attention to it or blatantly ignore it. When a person was put on the altar by everyone, then he could no longer act and speak as he liked, he would have to cast his emotions and desires aside and could only be cold and indifferent. Otherwise, it would be like in a chess game where one wrong move and the game would be lost. So later, when Mo Weiyu and Chu Wanning's feelings for each other became public knowledge, many felt as if their faith was shaken. They got angry, felt disgusted and refused to accept it. However, what they had forgotten was that it is cruel and unfair to put a person on a high pedestal to worship him but force him to live in accordance to their expectations, to demand that he act in the way that the majority wanted and not to allow him to have private emotions and desires. End chapter.